This video is sponsored by Incogni. Following the Marvels, Disney's next big flop is the animated Wish, a movie which in a sense celebrates Disney's 100th anniversary, though there is very little to celebrate about how the movie is performing. The movie flopping, however, came as no surprise to Disney, not just because of the early tracking figures, but because of the increasing awareness within Disney that the messaging they have infused into all of their programming is causing the audience to abandon all Disney brands, just in time for the 100th anniversary. In this editorial, I'll begin with a brief look at Disney's most recent high-profile flops, up to and including Wish, before exploring the revelations in the company's Form 10-K filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission, and finally, what Disney should do with these revelations. Of course, Disney isn't the only major entertainment company that has found itself at odds with its own audience as of late. As long-term watchers of this channel will know, quite a few fan-favorite film and TV franchises have alienated their own audience, and yet Disney stands out. But before we get into that, you might have noticed something else that stood out as well, namely all the advertisements you've seen recently that seemed oddly personal to you. Like, if you search for a loan or a medical issue or something to that end, you'll suddenly get no end of advertisements for services you never visited or asked for that nonetheless target you. And it doesn't stop with ads, because that's where the spam emails and maybe even automated robocalls begin, and there's a nefarious reason why. If you've ever signed up for a newsletter or a website or some other online service, then chances are your data was resold without you ever agreeing to it. There's a shadow industry of data brokers aggregating your personal data and reselling it to third parties, some of whom are significantly less legit than others. There's hundreds of such data brokers, with more arriving on the scene each year, buying and reselling personal data like your full name, your email address, phone number, home address, SSN, shopping habits, online alias, employment history, financial information, and much, much more. And as valuable as that information may be for those trading in it, all you get out of it is of course spam and the risk that your data sooner or later will be leaked in a data breach, in which it's made freely available for criminals, putting you at additional risk for more targeted scams and even identity theft, where loans may be taken out in your name. The good news, though, is that you have the right to request that data brokers delete the information they have about you. The bad news is that each and every one of them will try every trick to weasel out of doing so, and there's so many of them it would take you years to see this through yourself. The really good news then is that Incogni, this video sponsor, can do it for you. Incogni helps you protect your privacy and take your personal data off the market by reaching out to data brokers on your behalf, demand your personal data be removed, and plow through their objections as they come. Best of all, the whole process is automated, so all you have to do is create an account, grant Incogni the right to work on your behalf, and kick back and relax while they do the work for you, keeping you up to date with the progress every step of the way. Since this channel is sponsored by Incogni, we naturally have a deal for you. The first 100 of our viewers to use our code MIDNIGHT at the link in the description will get 60% off Incogni. So head down to the description and get your data protected now. And with that, let's move on to Wish. Actually, let's go back a little bit further, 1 year further to be exact. 1 year ago, Disney released the animated Strange World, a movie where everyone could see themselves on screen, because everyone on screen was LGBTQIAP+, neurodivergent, or otherwise belonging to what Hollywood calls underrepresented groups. Even the dog was disabled. The movie was so unbelievably incredibly inclusive that it excluded most everyone. And in their epic piece on the transition from Iger to Chapek and back to Iger, CNBC revealed that then CEO Bob Chapek contemplated scrapping the entire movie, because he knew that that way they would at the very least get a tax write-off for it. The only reason he signed off on its release in the end was because Iger had greenlit it and Disney's activist employees wanted to change the world with it, and at the time, the soon-to-be deposed Bob Chapek simply didn't have the institutional power to stand against them, not after having been systematically undermined by Iger and his cronies at every turn. And so, Strange World was released and instantly became one of the biggest flops of all time, losing Disney $200 million and severely damaging the Disney brand in the process. I submit that coupled with Pixar's Lightyear, which was released earlier that year, Strange World did for family audiences what Star Wars The Last Jedi had done for the Star Wars fanbase, namely drive home the message that Disney is no longer for them. Fast forwarding back to current events, The Little Mermaid remake flopped, as the international audience simply flat out rejected it. Pixar's Elemental had legs, but don't let that fool you, the legs did not outdo the initial floppage, so a flop it remains. The Marvels is in the running for the biggest flop of all time, that includes of any movie ever. And now, rounding out Disney's Year of Hell, which unfortunately just so happens to fall on their 100th anniversary, is Wish. Knowing in advance that Wish was bound to flop, Disney pulled out all the stops trying to obfuscate the numbers they knew would be forthcoming. For all intents and purposes, the movie has been in wide domestic release for a week, so it's a week's worth of box office that is packed into the barely $30 million opening weekend figure, which was only enough to open in third place, behind the surprisingly good Hunger Games prequel in its second week, and the R-rated, nearly 3-hour-long Napoleon, which in no universe should beat an animated Disney feature in its opening weekend. Yet here we are. Napoleon kicked Disney's ass worldwide, as Wish only opened to a total of $59 million all over the world. That is how weak the Disney brand is, and that it is entirely on Disney themselves. On November 22nd, one of the best entertainment journalists out there, namely John F. Trent, formerly of Bounding Into Comics, presently of That Park Place, wrote a piece about the Walt Disney Company's 10K form filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission. This is a public piece of information which historically no one would have bothered to look at. But Disney have made themselves historically unpopular, so they've got people watching their every move now. Among other things, this form outlines a number of risk factors Disney as a company is facing, and this is according to Disney themselves. And since they are the ones narrating this, their spin on the situation is telling in and of itself. One of their bullet points state, "We face risks relating to misalignment with public and consumer tastes and preferences for entertainment, travel and consumer products, which impact demand for our entertainment offerings and products and the profitability of any of our businesses." Underneath the bullet point, the company states, "Our businesses create entertainment, travel and consumer products, whose success depends substantially on consumer tastes and preferences that change in often unpredictable ways." So, according to Disney then, the risk factor here is the audience, since consumer tastes can change at the drop of a hat, according to Disney. They double down on this. Demand for certain out-of-home entertainment experiences, such as theater-going to watch movies, has not returned to pre-pandemic levels. Now, this is patently bullshit. It has for most everyone else. It's just Disney content that keeps on flopping. But moving on. In addition, many of our businesses increasingly depend on acceptance of our offerings and products by consumers outside the US. Yeah, when you alienate the domestic audience, the international audience does tend to become more important by comparison. Too bad you're alienating them too. Doubling down on how mean and how unpredictable the audience is though, they add, "The success of our businesses therefore depends on our ability to successfully predict and adapt to changing consumer tastes and preferences outside as well as inside the US. Moreover, we must often invest substantial amounts in content production and acquisition of sports rights, launch of new sports-related studio programming, theme park attractions, cruise ships or hotels and other facilities or customer-facing platforms before we know the extent to which these products will earn consumer acceptance. And these products may be introduced into a significantly different market or economic or social climate from the one we anticipated at the time of the investment decisions. This then is how Disney excuses their flops. What they're saying is that these all seemed like good ideas when they were greenlit, but then those dawn consumers went forth and unpredictably changed their minds, all at the same time and in the same direction, and then suddenly what looked like surefire hits like Strange World and Wish and The Marvels ended up becoming the biggest flops in history. It's just one of those things. No one could have seen it coming. Except everyone could. When Disney claims that consumer preferences are in a constant state of flux, that is them making excuses. Because by and large, consumer preferences never change, only how those preferences are expressed change. Case in point, for boys, it's always about a cool character being heroic and saving others. What changes is how that hero is expressed. Sometimes he can be a barbarian, or a soldier, or an Italian plumber, or a robot, or even a turtle, but the fundamentals never change. Recognizing this is what enabled Ike Perlmutter to transform Marvel into a billion-dollar empire and create the wildly successful MCU, until Kevin Feige mucked it all up by deviating from the formula. In parallel with the Disney princesses, battling evil stepmothers and other non-blood relatives close to the family, while finding their one true love has been a successful recipe for a century, until Disney themselves stopped following it.
You said you were bringing a modern edge to it on stage. What do you mean by that?
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is...
She's not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be if she was fearless, fair, brave, and true. And so it's just a really incredible story for, I think, young people everywhere to see themselves in.
Yeah, they did something similar to that in Wish as well. Didn't work out so well there, so why would Disney ever think that it would? There is no reading of this, which makes Disney look good, but if we apply a lot of goodwill, a lot more than any entertainment company is deserving of, then one can read into this that Disney's market research department is simply dumb and incompetent. The only way they could ever reach the conclusion that market preferences are changing is if they exclusively based their market research on the old Twitter and nothing else. As we now know, thanks to Elon Musk and the revelations in the Twitter files, Twitter, as it used to be, could not be used for any kind of market research purposes whatsoever. The reason for that is simple. It was so influenced by government agencies that any voice not in line with the desired social narratives was de-boosted, to the point that trends were artificial and data was so skewed that no reliable market research could be extrapolated from it. That's no excuse though, as Disney has enough other means of market research that they should have been aware that something was very off with the old Twitter. And indeed, in the end, they tacitly do admit that they know the problem isn't changing audience preferences. Going back to the article from that park place, the company then conceded. Further, consumers' perceptions of our position on matters of public interest, including our efforts to achieve certain of our environmental and social goals, often differ widely and presents risks to our reputation and brands. Well, there's your problem right there, Disney. Only it's not that consumers' perception on Disney's environmental and social goals differ, but that Disney has such goals at all, and that they are wildly unpopular with the majority of the audience, because those goals adversely affect both the parks and the on-screen entertainment. You'd think Disney might consider changing these policies, but that also begs the questions. Exactly what are these policies, and why do Disney have them in the first place? That we will take a look at in the next video. For now, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comments. And before you go, remember that the first 100 of our viewers to use our code MIDNIGHT at the link in the description will get 60% off Incogni. All you have to do is create an account, grant Incogni the right to work on your behalf, and kick back and relax while they work at systematically removing your personal data from where it doesn't belong.